Chapter 2198. The person who came was dressed in a red dress. Her aura was restrained, yet she exuded a noble and lazy aura. Her beautiful face was the portrait of Ghost Dr. Fingzhou that his subordinate had shown him. This person was Ghost Dr. Fingzhou. However, even he did not expect that she would dare to sneak in here. Fingzhou extended her hand and the azure-edged sword instantly appeared. The tip of the sword pointed to the ground. She stared at the five Venom sect master who was surrounded by a black aura and curled her lips. Looks like I came at the right time. As her voice fell, the red figure swept forward. As her clothes fluttered, the azure-edged sword pierced towards the person who was sitting cross-legged with lightning speed. Before the tip of the sword touched the five Venom sect master, the aura of the sword tip had already attacked. The aura of the aura visible to the naked eye was shocking and murderous. However, this aura of the sword aura was blocked by a black aura. The two auras, one green and one black, intertwined. With a bang, the aura of the aura dispersed and disappeared into the air. When the two auras dispersed and disappeared, the azure-edged sword in Fingzhou's hand pierced forward. The five Venom sect master who was sitting cross-legged moved his hands. The black aura coiled up and his hands quickly caught Fingzhou's long sword, using the strength of his hands to block the azure-edged sword that was piercing forward. Fingzhou wanted to stab the azure-edged sword another inch forward, but she was unable to move it. On the contrary, under her strength and the five Venom sect master's obstruction, the two auras repelled each other and the sword gradually bent. The hand holding the sword trembled. The strength was so great that she could not pull the sword out even if she wanted to. She had the strength of a celestial saint and her profound strength cultivation had long reached the martial god level. However, the opponent's strength was above hers. He had the strength of a venerable immortal. Moreover, he had the strength of a peak venerable immortal. This strength was one stage lower than hers. In terms of strength and pressure, he suppressed her, causing her to be unable to gain the upper hand. She only saw the five Venom sect masters' hands that were surrounded by aura slowly turn. In the next moment, the aura suddenly became stronger and with a bang, it heavily struck her. She let out a muffled groan and retreated several meters before stabilizing her footing. She felt the blood and qi surging in her chest, and a trace of blood rushed up to her throat and overflowed from the corner of her mouth. She wiped away the blood at the corner of her mouth and frowned slightly as she stared at the five Venom sect master. She felt the hand holding the sword tremble slightly and the web between her thumb and index finger go numb. The strength of a peak immortal venerable couldn't be underestimated. Just one strike was enough to cause the blood and qi in her body to surge. The hand holding the sword trembled slightly. It was no wonder that the black uncle would fall into the hands of the five Venom sect master and almost lose his life. Not only was that man extremely powerful, but he was also covered in poison. It seemed that if he didn't get rid of them today, they would become a huge problem in the future. A mere celestial sage wants to fight me. Ha! Fingzhou, you've got guts. The five Venom sect master, who was sitting cross-legged, narrowed his eyes and stared at Fingzhou. As he spoke, he brushed his sleeves and stood up. In the beginning of the battle between the two, he had firmly held the upper hand and did not suffer any losses. However, he was interrupted in the middle of his cultivation, causing his vicious aura to surge and poison aura to surge around his body. A black aura surged out from his body along with his aura, filling the entire cave. If it wasn't for Fengzhou's body that was immune to poison, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to fight. Chapter 2199. Immediately, she mobilized the qi in her body and changed her pace. The azure sword in her hand once again attacked forward. The five Venom sect master flicked his sleeve and went forward. He did not hold any weapon in his hand and only used the wind from his sleeve as a blade. With a flick of his sleeve, a strong chi flow blocked Fengzhou's incoming sword. His palm struck forward. Xiao! A chi flow attacked with a xiao sound. Accompanied by a black gas, it instantly attacked Fengzhou. Fengzhou quickly dodged to the side. That chi flow swept past her and landed on the wall behind her. It melted the wall and created a cave. Seeing this scene, her heart sank. She stared at him with a serious expression. What a powerful poison technique. Not only was his body covered in poison, the chi flow that attacked also contained poison. If she was hit, it would be difficult to preserve her life. Fengzhou, there is a path to heaven but you don't want to take it. There is no door to hell but you insist on entering. Today, this sovereign wants to see how you will survive. A gloomy voice sounded. His gaze was filled with hostility as he stared at the extremely dazzling beauty in red. Suddenly, he revealed a strange smile. No, killing you is really too much of a pity. Such a beautiful woman, if she were to be this sovereign's concubine in bed, would definitely be in ecstasy. Hearing this, Fengzhou's gaze turned cold. Her ice-cold eyes stared at the Five Venoms sect master. She sneered, "Keep on dreaming." Her body's speed increased in an instant. Her footsteps were ethereal and strange. She spun the azure sword in her hand and channeled the spirit force in her palm. With a "hoo" sound, the life flame sprang up from the sword blade. The scarlet flame and the azure sword chi fused together as if they had become one. Xiao! Hoo! The sword's shadow swept out with flames. The swift and fierce chi flow was like a fire dragon surging violently. It was also like a ferocious tiger pouncing forward. It rushed towards the Five Venoms sect master at a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover. Hiss! That sword came too quickly, breaking through his defenses and aiming for a fatal spot on his body. In that instant, in order to avoid the fatal spot, he used both his hands to summon chi to try and catch the incoming sword. But who would have thought that before his palms could get close, they would be blasted away by the green-edged sword chi, and he would be burned by the flames on the sword blade. As he staggered back, the sword stabbed into his shoulder, and the icy cold sword chi mixed with the scorching hot flames instantly spread from the wound to his entire body, causing him to suck in a breath of cold air. Ah! He endured the pain from the ice and fire and sent his palm forward, releasing poison gas. In order to avoid that palm, Fengzhou turned the sword that had pierced his shoulder, dug a hole in his shoulder, and pulled it out. Damn it! He cursed angrily. He didn't need to look to know that blood was gushing out from his shoulder. He immediately raised his hand and pressed on the surrounding pressure points to stop the bleeding. Because he was injured, a vicious aura spread out. The black figure turned into a black smoke and rushed towards Fengzhou. She only saw black smoke in front of her, but she couldn't see the figure of the Five Venoms sect master. It was also at this moment that she suddenly felt a cold killing intent enveloping her. But at that moment, she couldn't even tell where the killing intent came from. Be careful. Mo Chen's voice entered her ears. Immediately after, she felt her waist being hugged by someone. Her body spun and left her original place. When she steadied herself, she saw a black figure rushing out from the black smoke. Beside her was Mo Chen, who was dressed in white. Chapter 2200. I'm fine. She shook her head and said, "The Five Venoms sect master has run away, let's chase after him." With that, she quickly rushed outside. Seeing that she was fine, Mo Chen glanced at the cave and then chased after her. When the Five Venoms sect master rushed outside, he saw that the poison envoys guarding the cave had been killed one by one. When he exited the cave, he saw flames soaring into the sky. The flames illuminated more than half of the valley, and he could hear the sounds of battle in the distance. Seeing this scene, the chi and blood in his body surged. His hands clenched into fists, and he raised his head and roared, "Fengjiu!" A mere woman dared to make an enemy out of him. A mere woman. She dared to destroy his poison valley. She killed so many of his poison envoys. At this moment, his heart was filled with hatred. He did not try to escape, but turned around and stared at the exit of the cave. She dared to kill his poison envoys. She dared to destroy his poison valley. He would make her suffer a fate worse than death. When Fengjiu and Mo Chen chased after him, they saw him standing there, staring at them with a gloomy face. Seeing him, Mo Chen's gaze moved slightly, and he secretly sized him up. Seeing that the poison envoys were strong and murderous, he could not help but pull back Fengjiu, who was about to step forward. "Don't be rash, you're still not his match." As he spoke, he pulled her back and said, "His strength is at the peak of Immortal Venerable, and unlike his subordinates, he has rich battle experience. You must not be careless. If we don't get rid of this person, he will become a great threat," Fengjiu said with a frown. Staring at the 5 Venom sect master in front of them, he said to Mo Chen, "It is indeed difficult for me to gain the upper hand against him. His poison arts are very powerful, even stone walls can be dissolved and corroded. If we are hit, the consequences will be unthinkable. If we want to kill him on the spot, we can only have a chance of winning if we join hands." While the two of them were speaking in low voices, the 5 Venom sect master's gaze swept past Fengjiu and landed on Mo Chen, who was dressed in white and looked like an immortal. He narrowed his eyes. "And who are you?" "Tian Jizi's disciple, Mo Chen." As he spoke, his calm gaze landed on the 5 Poison sect master. Hearing this, the 5 Poison sect master sneered, "I have no grudges with Tian Jizi. Since you are his disciple, why are you involved in this matter? Could it be that he's taken a fancy to this Fengjiu and wants to win a smile from her?" Hearing these words, Mo Chen smiled and slowly walked forward. "I've heard that the 5 Poison sect master's poison arts can be said to be unparalleled. Today, I'd like to see if it is truly as powerful as the rumors say." As he spoke, his figure flashed and moved towards the 5 Poison sect master at an extremely fast speed. Fengjiu stood to the side and watched. When she saw that Mo Chen's aura was that of a peak ultimate venerable, she could not help but be slightly surprised. Normally, he would restrain his aura, so she thought that his strength was not so strong. She did not expect him to have the strength of a peak immortal venerable. Many cultivators had to be over 100 years old or even a few hundred years old before they could have the strength of an immortal venerable. But he, at such a young age, already had such a heaven-defying cultivation base. Saying that her strength was already abnormal, she felt that the strength of the people around her was truly heaven-defying. After all, her current cultivation base was not only due to her profound spiritual body, but also due to the assistance of medicinal pills. But they had steadily increased their strength from one stage to the next. Chapter 2201. The air was filled with the powerful aura of a venerable immortal. That aura was heavy and oppressive. If she did not have the protection of the ancient aura, she probably would not have been able to withstand the powerful aura of 2 venerable immortals. Bang! Bang bang! The air current on the ground fell. She saw the venerable poison master's palm strike and a hole appeared in the ground due to the corrosion. She raised her eyes and saw that the honorable poison master had several wounds on his body as he fought with Mo Chen. Because of the wound on his shoulder, his complexion was somewhat unsightly. Moreover, the more they fought, the more chaotic his aura became. If nothing unexpected happened, Mo Chen should be able to defeat him very quickly. Thinking of this, she felt relieved. Although his strength was comparable to Mo Chen's, Mo Chen's fighting strength was getting stronger and stronger. It was not a problem for Mo Chen to suppress him. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, she would not have known that he had such strength. Xiao Jiu. Mo Chen raised her head and looked towards the source of the voice. She saw Guan Shilin, who was covered in blood, walking towards her with a broadsword in his hand. At this moment, the sect leader of the Five Venoms sect was sent flying by Mo Chen's palm. His figure retreated towards Guan Shilin. Seeing this, Mo Chen was shocked and quickly shouted, "Dodge!" Guan Shilin saw that person retreating towards him and immediately swung his saber towards that person without thinking. After all, in this place, other than Feng Zhou and Mo Chen, everyone else could be killed. The biting cold chi of the saber force brought along a swift and fierce chi as it whizzed out, attacking the Five Venoms sect master. The Five Venoms sect master, who was retreating, sensed the murderous intent coming from behind him. Seeing Feng Zhou's nervous expression, he immediately sneered, and his figure quickly turned back. After seeing clearly who had come, he dodged his attack. At the same time, he stretched out his hand to grab his neck. "Brother!" Feng Zhou's heart skipped a beat. Without a second thought, she gathered her chi and rushed forward. Because her speed was not as fast as the other party, she immediately raised the Qing Feng sword in her hand and sent it flying out with a swift and fierce chi, piercing towards the hand that was grabbing her brother's neck. Guan Shilin, on the other hand, felt his entire body stiffen in that instant. He was shrouded by a powerful pressure and was unable to move. He could only watch as the man revealed a sinister smile that was filled with murderous intent. He watched as the man's dark purple hand reached for his neck. The aura of death enveloped him in that instant, but at that moment, he did not have the slightest ability to resist. Ever since he entered the martial god realm and had been training outside to increase his strength, this was the first time he had encountered such a powerful opponent. The other party's mere pressure was enough to suppress him and render him unable to move. The strength of this person's strength made his heart tremble involuntarily. He had originally thought that he was strong enough to protect himself and the people he wanted to protect. However, he did not expect that there would always be someone stronger. With his strength, he could deal with cultivators who were on par with him, but against a strong person who was so much stronger than him, he did not even have the chance to resist. However, he wasn't willing to be killed just like that, and was even more unwilling to watch this scene unfold before his eyes. Thus, the fury in his heart caused the profound energy aura in his body to surge violently like a broken dam, slamming against his heart. The unwillingness and strong willpower in his heart caused the battle intent in his body to surge forth, attacking his bound body again and again. Chapter 2202. Xiao. The swift and fierce sword pierced over with a xiao sound, causing the hand that was reaching for his throat to be forcibly pulled back to avoid the azure-edged sword that was flying over. However, when the azure-edged sword flew past, his hand once again attacked. This time, it carried the determination to win. One could even see the sinister light in his eyes and the bloodthirsty smile at the corner of his mouth. In his ears, he heard his sister Feng Zhou's panicked cries. In his body, a surging battle intent and a powerful profound energy aura suddenly surged. Like the waves of the ocean, it instantly stirred up 1,000 layers of waves. At the same time, a powerful battle intent and profound energy aura suddenly surged out from his body. A visible stream of air, carrying a dazzling light, suddenly burst forth and attacked the Five Poison sect master who was attacking him. At the same time, his body moved and he quickly avoided the hand that was about to grab him. He raised the large saber in his hand and waved it. Whoosh! The large saber flew out with a saber aura. The saber chopped towards the Five Poison sect master with a force that was too fast for one to cover one's ears. It chopped off the hand that the five poison sect master had not been able to pull back in time. Hiss. Ah! A mournful voice filled with disbelief rang out. In that instant, it soared into the sky. A powerful venerable immortal's aura was released from that miserable scream. It pervaded the entire valley and shook the ground. Ah! That a hand flew out. Because of the force, it spun a few times in the air before falling to the ground. The five poison sect master held his chopped off arm and quickly retreated. At this moment, he was close to madness. Because the air around his body was like a deflated balloon, hissing sounds were heard. His poison technique dispersed from the cut on his arm, causing his face to be pale and bloodless. Seeing this scene, Fengzhou was stunned. She stopped moving and looked on in disbelief. Her brother had actually chopped off the five poison sect master's right hand by accident. And this right hand was where his life gate was located. Looking at the five venom sect master's poison arts dissipating, as well as his face of disbelief and rage, how could she not know that this blade had almost destroyed him? She reckoned that even if he was lucky enough to escape from their hands, it would be very difficult for him to cultivate the poison arts again. Seeing this scene, Mo Qin was also stunned. He glanced at Guan Shilin, who was surging with battle intent. Who would have thought that the sect master of the five poison sect, a pinnacle immortal venerate, would have his Achilles heel severed by a single slash from Dumbo? Moreover, the sect master's Achilles heel was on his right hand. If Guan Shilin had not chopped off his hand, it would have been difficult for him to discover that his Achilles heel was in such a place. Compared to their stupefied expressions, Guan Shilin was filled with fighting spirit. His battle instincts were screaming for him to wield his sword and fight with all his might. Therefore, he did not think about anything else at this moment. All he wanted to do was to get rid of the person in front of him. Ha! Soul-chasing slash. He suddenly moved forward and waved the saber in his hand. His profound chi aura surged, and with the chi of the saber, he viciously chopped down at the five poison sect master. The five poison sect master's eyes were red. The air around his body surged and blew his hair loose. After dodging the attack, he roared at Guan Shilin. I'm going to kill you. Kill you. Whoosh. Bang bang bang. Chapter 2203. Brother. Be careful. Fengzhou shouted. Seeing the five poison sect master madly attacking her brother, she immediately rushed forward, wanting to pull him back. But at this moment, who would have thought that the five poison sect master, who was originally attacking her brother, would suddenly turn around and charge towards her at an extremely fast speed. Fengzhou. Be careful. Xiao Zhou. When Mo Chen and Guan Shilin saw this scene, their hearts couldn't help but jump. Without thinking, they rushed forward. However, no matter how fast the two of them were, they couldn't be faster than the sect master of the five poisons, who was only a few steps away from Fengzhou. Seeing the sinister smile of the sect master of the five poisons' crazed face, Fengzhou's heart skipped a beat. Oh no. I've been tricked. The five poisons' main target wasn't her brother, but her. However, even though she was vigilant, the speed at which the other party suddenly rushed towards her was too fast. In addition, she had already increased her speed to begin with. Under the force of the impact, she couldn't stop or retreat even if she wanted to. In the blink of an eye, the sect master of the five poisons had already flashed to her side and grabbed her by the throat. His ice-cold hand was still stained with blood. His wet hand was strangling her throat, making her feel especially uncomfortable. Because he was strangling her so tightly, she couldn't breathe. She couldn't help but stand on her tiptoes to relieve the suffocating feeling. Xiao Zhou. Let her go. Guan Shilin and Mo Qin came to the side of the two people, one in front and one behind. However, Fengzhou's throat was already clasped. Her life was in the hands of the sect master of the 5 poisons, so the two of them didn't dare to make the slightest movement. They were afraid that the sect master of the 5 poisons would hurt Fengzhou. Stop. Both of you stop. If you dare come any closer, I'll break her neck. The 5 Venom sect master shouted in a gloomy voice. He tightened his grip on Fengzhou's neck, causing Imo Chen and Guan Xilin's hearts to skip a beat. The two of them stopped and looked at Fengzhou, who was being held captive. They were anxious, but there was nothing they could do about the situation. As long as they made the slightest movement, the 5 Venom sect master would definitely kill her before they made a move. Fengzhou frowned slightly. This feeling of being under someone else's control was terrible. The hand that was tightly gripping her neck did not loosen at all. It was as if she moved, he would break her neck. Being under someone else's control, even she did not dare to act rashly. Ha 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 ha. The leader of the 5 Venom sect laughed maniacally. He stared at Imo Chen and Guan Xilin with a vicious and bloodthirsty gaze. If you dare to follow me, I will kill her. Don't challenge my patience. As he spoke, he grabbed Fengzhou tightly with both hands and dragged her away. With a leap, he quickly disappeared into the night with her. What do we do? Guan Xilin was extremely anxious. He wanted to chase, but he was worried that he would harm Fengzhou. He could not help but look at Imo Chen. Imo Chen's eyes darkened. He looked in the direction that the two of them had disappeared and frowned. He said slowly, "Let's wait. The 5 Venom sect master's right arm was cut off by you. His martial arts are leaking out. I think, as long as there's a chance, Fengzhou should be able to escape from his hands. Then we won't chase." Guan Xilin asked worriedly, "The 5 Venom sect master looks murderous. I also cut off his arm. I'm worried that he will vent his anger on Xiaozhou." Chapter 2204. On the other side, Fengzhou, who had been abducted, had her major acupoints sealed and her spiritual energy and aura sealed. After leaving the valley, she saw the Honorable Poison Master take out a transportation scroll and knock her unconscious, bringing her along with him, instantly disappearing into the forest of the valley. In a cave, in front of the one-armed 5 Venom sect master, there were more than 10 bottles and jars. With one hand, he poured the medicine into a stone bowl in front of him and mixed it inside. Finally, he took out a medicine bottle and poured it into the stone bowl. What came out of the bottle was fresh blood. That fresh blood and various medicines mixed together and gradually condensed. He revealed a strange smile and turned the medicine inside into a red pill the size of an elixir. Picking up that pill, he laughed sinisterly, his laughter filled with madness and viciousness. "Ghost Doctor. I'll let you have a taste of the Honorable Poison Master's power." His blood-red eyes looked at the red pill in his hand and his sinister laughter came out of his mouth. That laughter was mixed with madness, causing people to tremble in fear. He took that pill and came to the unconscious Fengzhou's side. Pinching open her mouth, he stuffed the pill in and then silently sat to one side, watching Fengzhou's reaction. Fengzhou was awoken by the pungent smell of blood. When she opened her eyes, she felt something strange in her mouth. She frowned and sat up, feeling a burning sensation in the blood vessels in her body. "What did you feed me?" She stared at the 5 Venom sect master, who was sitting to one side, using a sinister gaze to stare at her. Her heart suddenly felt uneasy. At this moment, all of her major acupoints had been sealed and her spiritual energy and aura had been sealed. She was completely unable to mobilize it. And the profound energy and aura that she had never used before, she did not dare to reveal even the slightest bit, afraid that he would discover that there was another aura in her body. Right now, the only chance she had to escape from his hands was to take advantage of his unpreparedness. Only, she did not know what medicine he had fed her while she was unconscious. Even if she did not know what medicine it was, she knew that it was definitely not something good. What did you eat? Ha! You'll find out soon enough. He stared at her, his blood-red eyes glowing with a strange madness. Fengjiu frowned. The temperature of her blood seemed to be rising. It was a strange feeling, but other than that, there was nothing wrong with her body. She didn't know what the medicine was for, but why was the smell of blood in her throat so choking? What kind of blood was that? He reached out to grab her chin and said fiercely, Fengjiu. You've destroyed everything I had. If I were to kill you just like that, wouldn't that be letting you off too easily? Don't worry, I'll make you wish you were dead, ah ha 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 ha. He waved his hand and strode out. At the same time, he raised his hand and set up a barrier at the entrance of the cave. With her acupoint sealed and her inability to use her spiritual energy, she was no different from a mortal. In her current state, a single barrier was enough to trap her. Fengjiu watched him leave and then looked around the cave. Chapter 2205. All the major acupoints on her body had been sealed and all the veins in her body seemed to be twisted together, making it difficult for her to exert any strength. Although all the acupoints in her body were sealed, she should be able to use her profound energy aura to break them open. However, her profound energy aura alone was unable to break them open. The profound energy aura in her body surged and rushed towards her acupoints. Sweat seeped out of her forehead due to the pain from the twisting veins and veins. The blood in her body, which was originally boiling hot after taking the medicine, started to boil. She clenched her teeth and surged all her profound energy aura. She felt the profound energy in her body rushing towards the sealed acupoints like a broken dam, breaking them open in one fell swoop. Phew! As the profound energy aura broke open her acupoints, she lightly exhaled and quickly adjusted the profound energy aura in her body. After feeling that all the acupoints in her body had been broken open, she then retracted her profound energy aura and placed her fingers on her wrist to check her pulse. With this check, her brows couldn't help but knit together. What exactly was this? How could it be like this? She retracted her hand and stood up. She didn't see the Honorable Poison Master at the entrance of the cave, so she thought for a while in the cave. Her hand reached towards her thigh and felt that the dagger tied there was still there. She then returned to her original position and sat down. She could have escaped at this time, but she didn't want to. She wanted to take the Honorable Poison Master's life and end it all. The current her was someone he couldn't guard against. As long as she found the right opportunity to strike, she believed that the Honorable Poison Master would definitely die in her hands. If such a person were to escape, he would probably become a great enemy of the Heavenly Pill building in the future. And right now, it was the best time to get rid of him. After about an hour, the Honorable Poison Master's figure appeared at the entrance of the cave. He glanced at Fengjiu, who was leaning against the wall, and sneered. He waved his hand to remove the enchantment and walked in. He sat down in a corner and took out a net bag and threw it to the side. Something was moving inside the bag, and there were all kinds of subtle noises. Hearing the noises and looking at the bag, Fengjiu guessed that there were some poisonous things in the bag. They should be scorpions, venomous snakes, spiders, and the like. Sure enough, the Honorable Poison Master opened the bag and took out a poisonous snake. He pinched the snake's head with one hand and brought the snake close to his mouth to bite it. The poisonous snake's blood was sucked into his mouth. The blood in his mouth looked a bit ghastly. A venomous snake was sucked dry by him and tossed to the side like a dried snake. He reached into the bag again, and this time, he pulled out a rank 1 venomous spider. The venomous spider was about the size of a fist, and its 8 legs were covered in spikes. However, the venerable poison master tore off its 8 legs and tossed them aside. He then placed them into his mouth and bit them. As she listened to the crunching sounds coming from the cave, she couldn't help but be startled. Could it be that this venerable poison master feeds on poisons? Ordinary people would definitely die if they came in contact with these poisons, but he was able to mix them up and eat them raw without any problems. This could only mean that the poison in his body was even more poisonous than these poisons. Seeing that he had eaten a few things in a row, the bag was still moving. It was unknown what else was inside, but the honorable poison master directly reached his hand into it and stopped moving. After a long while, he stretched out his hand and turned his palm upwards. The qi in his body began to circulate. Seeing him cultivate with his eyes closed, Fengzhou's eyes slightly moved. Chapter 2206. She abruptly pulled out her dagger and swiftly pounced forward. The dagger in her hand was suffused with a cold glint as she instantly pierced towards him. The honorable poison master was just about to regulate his qi and stabilize his breathing when he suddenly sensed a murderous intent. His heart sank and he abruptly opened his eyes to take a look. When he saw Fengzhou holding a dagger in her hand, shock surfaced in his eyes. How is this possible? He instinctively wanted to dodge, but the other party had even taken into account his dodging action. The dagger stabbed fiercely into his heart. He only heard the sound of the sharp blade piercing his body, and he couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. Amen. A trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Not only was his vital point pierced, even his internal breathing had been disrupted and was currently running amok in his body. You. He clutched the wound on his chest which was gushing out blood as he looked at Fengzhou in disbelief. How could I possibly unseal all the major acupoints on my body? Or, how could I possibly have profound energy in my body? Fengzhou sneered as she stared at him. The dagger in her hand twirled in her hand as she moved forward. Because I myself am of the profound spiritual body. My spiritual energy has been sealed, but I can still use my profound energy. Otherwise, how could I possibly kill you? The moment her voice fell, the dagger in her hand had already struck forward once again. This time round, the honorable poison master was no longer caught unprepared. However, even though he was vigilant, the old injuries in his body had not yet healed, and there were new injuries in his heart. For a moment, his movements became slow, and his attack power was not as strong as he wished. The two of them exchanged more than 10 moves in the cave, and in the end, Feng Nine ended his life with a slash to his throat. You will not have a good ending. That honorable poison master collapsed, and with his last breath, he still said this sentence. Until he breathed his last, his face still carried a strange smile, as if he was laughing at something. Seeing him collapse, Fengzhou heaved a sigh of relief as she walked forward and squatted down. She stretched out her hand, and after ascertaining that he was indeed dead, she then sat down on the ground. Looking at his strange smile, she felt even more uneasy in her heart. Just what kind of pill did he give her? What kind of symptoms would there be when the medicinal pill took effect? When she checked her meridians, she found that there were more than 10 different poisons in her body, and the one that worried her the most was the beast blood boiling in her blood. That was definitely not an ordinary beast's blood. Right now, the symptoms had not shown up yet because the poison in his body was restraining each other. This made it even more troublesome. She sat on the ground and panted lightly. After adjusting her mood, she put away all the things on his body. Then, she went to check the empty bottles one by one. Finally, she picked up the bottle that still contained the beast blood. She brought the bottle close to her nose and took a sniff. The fishy smell was extremely strong. Moreover, there was an extremely powerful aura in the fishy smell. Her heart skipped a beat when she smelled the fishy smell and felt the aura. What would happen when it flared up? She kept everything properly and took out the corpse-dissolving water to melt the Honorable Poison Master's body. Only then did she walk out of the cave. If her brother had not chopped off the Honorable Poison Master's right hand and destroyed his life gate of poison, causing him to lose all of his poison techniques, she was afraid that she would not have been able to escape from his hands, much less kill him. Chapter 2207. Looking around, all she saw was an endless forest. She didn't even know where this place was. Why did the Honorable Poison Master bring her here with a teleportation scroll? She was just about to retrieve the Aurora teleportation scroll and return to Hundred Rivers City, but who knew that at this moment, a sharp pain came from her body. It was as if the blood vessels in her body were about to explode. Hiss! Ah! She cried out in pain and fell to the ground. Her hands hugged her body tightly and her face turned pale. Large beads of cold sweat seeped out of her forehead. She couldn't help but cry out in pain as she rolled on the ground. Hiss! Blood veins suddenly appeared on her pale and bloodless face. Her face gradually turned from pale to purplish black. Her lips also turned purplish black. The veins on the back of her hands also popped out and her skin turned purple. Ah! She cried out in pain. That kind of pain, as if someone was tearing her body apart, made her wish she was dead. She tried to force herself to endure it as she took out silver needles and pierced them into her acupuncture points to stop the pain. However, the silver needles didn't have any effect. Hiss! The aura of profound energy in her body spread out along with her painful cries. With a wave of her hand, the powerful aura of profound energy spread out in all directions. A bloodthirsty impulse surged in her body. At this moment, she couldn't help but want to kill someone. She wanted to vent the madness and fury in her body. However, at this moment, she faintly heard someone coming in her direction. It seems to be in front. I think I heard someone screaming. It sounds like a girl. Why would there be a girl alone in this place? No one should come to this kind of place. But that voice sounds like it's in this area. Hearing the voice gradually getting closer, Fengjiu knelt on the ground. The aura of profound energy in her body surged and a vicious aura whistled around her body. The wind blew against her red dress, causing it to make a whistling sound. Her eyes were red due to the surge of blood qi in her body. Like a wild beast, her eyes were filled with bloodlust and viciousness. There was not the slightest trace of her original coldness and wickedness. It was as if she was forcefully enduring it, forcefully suppressing her blood qi. Those blood-red eyes would occasionally return to normal. Unless there was something wrong with her aura, people would really think that they were seeing things. However, at this moment of clarity, Fengjiu gritted his teeth and flashed into her space. His entire body disappeared from the spot, leaving only some traces left behind by the surging airflow. Why is there no one here? It sounded like it came from here. A woman said in surprise. She looked around and said to the people around her, "Look, there's a cave over there. That's strange. We've been here several times, but we've never seen a cave here. Why is it here all of a sudden?" The place where we came from had an array formation. That array formation protected this area, so when we came here, we couldn't see the cave here. Just now, because we followed the sound, we walked through the array formation and came here. If Fengjiu was here, she would recognize that the person who spoke was one of the 4 people she had taught before, Duan Yi. Chapter 2208. The voice just now clearly came from this area. How come the people we came to find are gone? Duan Yi said in a low voice. He looked around and released his divine sense, but he couldn't detect any aura. Maybe they left. The woman next to him said and pulled on his sleeve, "Senior brother, let's go back. Otherwise, Marshal Uncle and the others will be worried." "All right." Duan Yi responded. Just as he was about to leave with her, his gaze fell on the cave entrance not far away. "I'll go in and take a look," he said and strode into the cave. Seeing this, the woman had no choice but to follow. After walking around in a circle, he only smelled the scent of blood and a mark on the ground. Duan Yi squatted down to check and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Why did this look so much like Fengzhou's corpse dissolving water? With this thought, he couldn't help but recall the voice he heard earlier. That voice couldn't have been Fengzhou's, right? No, it shouldn't have been her. How could she have let out that kind of scream? It should have been someone else. The woman followed in and saw him squatting there with a strange expression. She couldn't help but ask, "Senior brother. Senior brother, what's wrong?" "Nothing, let's go." He stood up, his heart inexplicably heavy. He was faintly worried and planned to find a time to visit Fengzhou. The two left and walked in the direction they came from. In the space, Fengzhou was soaking in the spirit spring water. The spirit spring water was suffused with a layer of faint green light, and threads of light flowed on the surface of the water. She was soaking in it very calmly, without the madness and pain she felt outside. She relaxed and soaked in it, letting the azure lotus chi in her body surround her, purifying the poison in her body bit by bit, as well as the strange blood in her blood. The azure lotus chi surged in the spring water, and the life force visible to the naked eye enveloped her. In this space, the medicine fields grew wildly because of the azure lotus chi in her body. About the time it took for an incense stick to burn, her entire body was lifted out of the water by the aura of the green lotus. Her entire body was dripping with water. Only then did they realize that she had already fainted. The green lotus in her body seemed to have a life of its own. She lifted it out of the water and put it aside. Then, a green aura visible to the naked eye flew to a corner of the space and rummaged through the pile of treasures. Finally, the green aura rolled out a pearl the size of an egg from the pile of treasures. Now, the azure lotus chi found this bead. It came to Fengzhou's side, and with a flash of green light, the bead cracked open, revealing a green bead that was twice the size of a pill. This green bead was dark green in color, and a powerful and rich aura of spiritual power surged in the bead, releasing a rich and pure life force. The azure lotus chi drew the bead into Fengzhou's mouth and swallowed it. At this moment, the unconscious Fengzhou woke up. Chapter 2209. The dark green bead swam through her blood. Wherever it passed, her divine sense could see specks of dark green light emitting from it. The pure aura was purifying her blood. After the bead circled around her body, it came to her dantian and merged with the green lotus. She saw that when the bead merged with the green lotus seemed to have absorbed nutrients. It grew bigger and the aura surrounding the green lotus became denser. Feeling that the restlessness in her body had disappeared, she was surprised and immediately checked her pulse. She couldn't help but be startled. "The poison in my body is gone," she muttered in disbelief. She couldn't understand the reason for this. She originally had a body that was immune to poison, but the poison that the Honorable Poison Master had concocted was very strange. She didn't know what kind of ferocious beast's blood had been mixed into it, but the poison that even her body couldn't withstand had disappeared without her doing anything. Was it cured by the green lotus? Can the chaotic green lotus detoxify? She muttered in doubt. She looked around and saw the broken thing that had fallen to the side. She went forward and picked it up to take a look. Why does it look so familiar? This seems to be She thought for a moment and a light bulb flashed in her mind. Isn't this the bead that Green Hair gave birth to? She suddenly realized. Yes, the bead that swam through her body and was finally swallowed by the green lotus. Thinking of this, she was indescribably stunned. What was going on? Green Hair was a chicken, but the egg it gave birth to was a bead. She didn't know the use of this bead, but at this time, it was inexplicably swallowed by the green lotus. It seemed to have merged with the bead and cured the poison in her body. Could it be that Green Hair had eaten something that he shouldn't have, and that's why he got this bead? She muttered in a low voice. Seeing that she was drenched in water, she immediately went to the side to change her clothes. When she felt that there was nothing wrong with her body, she flashed out of the space. When she appeared in front of the cave, she looked around. She wasn't in a hurry to go back. Instead, she used her divine sense to explore the surroundings and walked in a direction. She remembered that she had heard voices earlier. There should be people around here. Now that the Poison Master was dead, the Five Poisons sect was no longer a threat to the Heavenly Pill Building and the black market, so there was no hurry to go back. However, if she didn't go back, her brother would be anxious. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but smile. She didn't know that her brother's fighting strength was so strong. The poison in her body was detoxified, and the threat was gone. She couldn't help but feel relaxed. She walked forward briskly, and after walking for a distance, she found that there was a formation set up in this area. After easily avoiding the formation and walking for a while, she faintly heard sounds coming from the front. Thus, she restrained her aura and lightly leaped onto a tree. Her red figure gracefully flitted across the tree and quietly approached those people. When she came to a tree closer to those people, she saw that they were all wearing the Cloud Jade Immortal sect uniform. Among them, there was one person she was familiar with. Duan Yi. Chapter 22:10. Uncle Master, I would like to head back first. Duan Yi was talking to a middle-aged man who was standing at the side. Perhaps it was the sound he had heard earlier and the bad premonition in his heart that made him a little worried. He wanted to leave early to find out more about Fingzhou. We just came out not long ago, and you want to leave first. Why are you doing this? The middle-aged man asked in confusion. He looked at Duan Yi and said, When we came out, your master specially told me to let you have a good experience. If you leave now, I won't be able to answer to your master when I return. I'm worried about a friend of mine. I heard screams inside earlier. I don't know why, but I feel a little uneasy. I want to go back and find out more about her. Duan Yi said in a low voice. If that's the case, then before the middle-aged man could finish speaking, he saw someone throw something over and hit Duan Yi's head. He was stunned and instinctively looked in the direction of the throw. When he saw the beautiful woman in red sitting on the tree, he could not help but be stunned. Who was this woman? Why was she sitting there? Actually, he was even more shocked that he had not sensed the woman sitting there at all. Fortunately, she did not have any ill intentions. Otherwise, he was afraid that Duan Yi was caught off guard when someone threw something at his head. When he lowered his head to look, he saw that it was a fruit pit. His face darkened as he looked behind him and shouted in a low voice. Who are you? Not to mention his current strength and status in the sect, even before he entered the Cloud Jade Immortal sect, other than Fingzhou, no one had dared to throw something at his head. This person must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to throw a fruit pit at him. However, when he raised his head to look behind him and his gaze landed on the red figure on the tree, he was shocked and instinctively took 2 steps back. He widened his eyes and pointed at her with a look of disbelief. You, why are you here? When Duanye's voice was heard, the disciples who were resting and chatting under the tree instinctively raised their heads to look. They were stunned when they saw the red figure leaning against the tree. The woman was dressed in a dazzling red dress, and her ink-black hair was only tied up with a red ribbon. The rest of her hair fell behind her back, and as the breeze blew, a strand of hair gently brushed past her beautiful face, adding a touch of laziness and charm, causing the male disciples below to be unable to close their mouths. The immortal cultivation world did not lack beauties. However, there were very few beauties who were as enchanting and seductive as the woman in front of them who had a noble and inviolable aura. The noble aura around her made them feel ashamed of their inferiority. They wanted to look away from her, but they couldn't take their eyes off her dazzling body. Little Yi Yi, I trust you have been well since we last met. Feng Zhou's eyes narrowed as the corners of her lips curled up slightly, revealing a charming smile. For a moment, her originally beautiful face became even more charming under her smile, causing all the male disciples below to lose their minds and stare blankly for a moment. Duanye's face turned red when he heard the long-awaited teasing address. He stared at her and said angrily, I told you not to call me that. I haven't seen you for so long, but you are still so indecent. Aren't you afraid that others will laugh at you? Chapter 22:11. Duanyi instinctively raised his hand to touch his face. His face was burning hot, and he did not even need to look to know that it was red. He could not deny it even if he wanted to. Hence, he snorted and said awkwardly, No way. I'm a little hot. The middle-aged man at the side came back to his senses and saw that all the male disciples were staring at her in a daze. He could not help but cough loudly to wake everyone up. When the female disciples saw this, some were curious, some were jealous, and some were envious. All of them looked at the woman in red. Duanyi, who is this? The middle-aged man asked. It seemed like the two of them knew each other. Her name is Fengzhou, and she's my friend, Duanyi said as his gaze fell on Fengzhou. He could not help but ask, Aren't you coming down? Why did a girl like to sit on a tree so much? Seeing this, Fengzhou jumped down lightly from the tree and stood steadily in front of the two. She smiled at Duanyi and nodded at the middle-aged man. Just call me Fengzhou. I happened to pass by and saw Duanyi here, so I came over to say hello. Miss Feng. The middle-aged man nodded slightly and said, I'm the Jade True Celestial Duke of the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. Although she did not look old, he knew that she was a hidden powerhouse based on the fact that he did not know that she was there earlier. He did not dare to be too casual when he spoke. Even if he was a celestial duke of a sect, he did not dare to be arrogant. Uncle Master, let me talk to her, Duanyi said and pulled Fengzhou to the side without waiting for his Uncle Master to speak. He looked at her from head to toe and asked, I heard a scream from the other side of the cave. Was it you? Such a coincidence to pass by. He did not believe it. Hearing this, Fengzhou's eyes flashed and she said with a smile, Yes, it was me. Hearing this, Duanyi could not help but ask nervously, How are you? Are you okay? Why did you scream? Why are you here alone? Didn't you say that you were at the 100 River City's Heavenly Pill Dispensary? Don't worry. I'm fine. Fengzhou patted his head and got a glare from him. He couldn't help but chuckle. It's really all right. There was just an accident. Fortunately, it's all right now. I wanted to go back, but I heard someone talking, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect it to be you. Looking at Duanye's red ears, she felt that it was extremely interesting. This brat was still so awkward and arrogant. He hadn't improved at all. It's good that you're fine. Duanyi said. Then, he warned, also, don't keep patting my head. It's not good. Poochie. Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh. You brat, are you afraid that it will affect you badly? Who asked you to still look like this after not seeing me for so long? There's no change at all. She shook her head. What do you mean? Look at my current cultivation level. My strength has increased by quite a bit. In any case, I am still considered a figure in the Cloud Jade Immortal sect. He seemed to be afraid that she would not approve of him, so he displayed his strength and cultivation level. All right. I know you're good. She chuckled and said, oh right, I just met Songming a while ago. He also told me about you guys. It seems that you guys are doing well. Chapter 22:12. Fengjiu chuckled and asked, where is this place? She had been brought here by the Honorable Poison Master and did not know where this place was. You don't know? He was stunned and looked at her with a strange expression. Then how did you get in? I was knocked unconscious and captured. She smiled and looked at his changed expression, but don't worry, I'm fine now. That person has been dealt with. Hearing this, Duan Ye's expression eased a little. He remembered the traces of the corpse dissolving water in the stone cave and said, is it the one in the stone cave? How did you get captured? There's actually someone who could make you fall for it. Fengjiu rolled her eyes and said, do you think I'm invincible? That was the sect master of the Five Venoms sect, a peak immortal venerable. How could I be his match with my current strength? It's already good that I'm not dead. If the Honorable Poison Master had taken advantage of her unconscious state to finish her off, she would probably be fine now. This is a corner of the Forest of Death that is connected to the lower reaches of the continent. This place is still considered the periphery, so the danger level is relatively low. Duan Yi looked at her and said, I originally wanted to go to your place to take a look, but seeing that you're unharmed now, I'm relieved. Fengjiu reached out to pat his head again, but seeing him take a step back defensively and stare at her, she changed her position and landed on his shoulder instead. She smiled and said, then don't worry and go train. I'll go back first. When you've made an appointment, come to the Heavenly Pill building in 100 Rivers City to find me. At that time, I'll treat you to a good meal and we'll have a good chat. Hearing this, Duan Ye's expression darkened. He looked at her and nodded, all right. Take care of yourself. Then I'll go first. She turned and walked back to where the Jade True Immortal Lord was and said, Immortal Lord, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Duan Yi. Don't worry, Miss Feng. The Jade True Immortal Lord nodded. He looked at the beautiful woman in red in front of him and felt strange. Why did the name Fengjiu sound so familiar? However, he had never seen her before, but he seemed to have heard this name somewhere before. Duan Yi, take care. Fengjiu waved her hand and then turned and left. Seeing her leave, Duan Yi did not move. However, when he saw her figure gradually getting further away, he frowned and walked to the Jade True Immortal Lord. Martial uncle, please tell my master that I'm going out to train. I'll go with her first. Please tell my master that I go out training. Hearing this, True Jade Immortal Monarch was stunned and hurriedly pulled him back. You want to go with her? When are you? Ling. No. If my master asks, just say that I left with Fengjiu. If he wants to find me, then go to the Heavenly Pill building in the 100 Rivers City. Duan Yi said, and immediately rushed in the direction of Fengjiu. At the same time, he shouted, Fengjiu. Wait for me. What training? Nothing could compare to being by her side. Chapter 22:13. After walking for a while, Fengjiu heard the voice behind her and couldn't help but be startled. She stopped and turned around to see Duan Yi following her. She looked at him in surprise and raised her eyebrows slightly as she asked, "Why are you following me?" Duan Yi quickly walked to her side and said, "Training is boring. I'll go with you and take a look at your heavenly pill house in Hundred Rivers City." Hearing this, she looked behind him and asked, "Your martial uncle agreed? Is it okay to follow me like this? What problem could there be? Let's go." As he spoke, he strode forward. Looking at Duan Yi walking in front of her, she shook her head and smiled. Originally, she wanted to use the Aurora transfer scroll to leave when they reached a place a little further ahead. Who would have thought that this brat would follow her? Since that was the case, the Aurora transfer scroll would not be used for the rest of the journey. Although the Aurora transfer scroll was a treasure and could teleport people away from their destination in an instant, it could only be used by the owner and could not be used to bring people away. Fengzhou, is Song Ming still in the Immortal Sect? What is his current level of strength? Duan Yi asked. Their strengths were about the same and they were not cultivating in the same sect. The last time they had contacted each other, they had only talked about the general situation and did not ask in detail. How was Song Ming's strength after not seeing him for so long? Fengzhou glanced at him and then smiled, "About the same as you." "What about you? What is your current level of strength? Why don't I see any spiritual energy on your body? Are you hiding it again?" Duan Ye's eyes scanned her body, wondering why he could not see her cultivation level. "Didn't I get into an accident? My spiritual energy has been sealed and I can't use it." She smiled and her gaze fell on the front. "Your spiritual energy has been sealed. Is it that poison master?" Duan Yi was shocked and stopped to pull her. "I can help you undo it." With his strength, he should be able to undo the sealed spiritual energy. Unexpectedly, Fengzhou shook her head. "You won't be able to undo it. That venerable poison is at the immortal venerable realm. I'm thinking of asking Imo Qin to help me undo it. His cultivation base is enough." Hearing this, Duan Yi frowned and looked at her. "You're too reckless. Don't you know that you have many enemies? You didn't even tell me that you couldn't use your spiritual energy and aura. Tell me, what if you encounter danger on the way back? Fortunately, I came with you. Otherwise, I really don't know how you would have saved yourself if you had encountered any danger along the way." Speaking up to hear, he suddenly thought of something and was stunned for a moment. "That's not right. I remember that you have a profound spiritual body, so you can't use your spiritual energy, but your profound energy shouldn't be sealed, right?" Fengzhou smiled and nodded. "Amen, I don't have any profound energy. Otherwise, how would I have been able to kill that honorable poison master?" She smiled and tucked a strand of hair that had been blown by the wind behind her ear. "What level is your profound strength at?" Duan Yi asked. He couldn't see anything from it. "My profound strength has only reached the martial god realm." She looked at the sky and said, "I don't know how long it will take to get out of this place. Why don't we travel by flying equipment?" As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and threw out the feather at her waist. The rainbow glass feather expanded in front of her until it was big enough for her to sit on. "Madam, we are just passing by. I wonder if it would be convenient for you to stay the night?" Fengzhou asked, meeting the gaze of the beautiful woman. "Of course, the two of you, please come in." She smiled and opened the door to let the two of them in. After they entered, she closed the door and led them inside. She said, "There are usually some cultivators passing by here who come to stay the night. My house doesn't have anything else but a lot of empty rooms. Please come with me and have a seat inside." "Mother, do we have guests?" A delicate woman's voice sounded. Duan Yi and Fengzhou stopped and looked towards the voice. Chapter 22:15. Fengzhou's eyes flickered as she stared at the three young women with different graces with great interest. The three of them looked to be between the ages of 15 and 18 or 19. One of them was dainty and pretty, the one in the middle was enchanting and flirtatious, while the last one was beautiful with a hint of arrogance. Three women, three different types of beauty. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at them and a faint smile appeared on the corners of her lips. Just as Fengzhou was sizing up the three women were sizing her up as well. The three of them were also beauties, but when they saw the woman in red robes before them, they could not help but secretly praise her. What a peerless beauty of peerless grace. The simple red robes on her body exuded an aura of incomparable splendor. Her half-squinted eyes, slightly curled lips, and faint smile carried a trace of languor and charm. As women, they could not help but be stunned by her beauty. A beauty like this was a true beauty. She only needed to stand there quietly and she was already as beautiful as a painting. One could not take their eyes off her. Duanyi couldn't help but frown when he saw that the three women who suddenly appeared were so outstanding. This place was indeed strange. It would be one thing if such a family existed in the city, but it was not normal for such a place to have such beautiful women. Especially since the way the three of them were looking at Fengzhou made him feel uncomfortable. However, when he looked at Fengzhou, he saw that her expression was the same as usual. There was no change in her expression at all. Cough. He cleared his throat and looked at the beautiful woman, asking, "Madam, may I ask if you could lead us to our rooms to rest?" "Of course. Please follow me, both of you." The beautiful woman then turned to the three women and said, "Prepare some food and wine. Serve these two guests later." "Yes, mother." The three of them bent their knees and bowed. Their beautiful eyes fell upon Duanyi with smiles. The two of them followed the beautiful woman inside. However, she did not arrange for them to stay in the same courtyard. Instead, she arranged for them to stay in separate courtyards. "Young lady, you will rest in this room tonight. As for this sir, please follow me to the courtyard next door to rest." Hearing this, Duanyi frowned and asked, "Are there no empty rooms in this courtyard?" "If there are, I'll stay here." Fengzhou smiled and glanced at Duanyi, saying, "The guest will follow the host's wishes. We'll stay as the madam says. We're only separated by one courtyard." When the beautiful woman heard this, she smiled and said to the two of them, "I'm really sorry, there's only one empty room left. The other rooms are filled with my girls' things." Duanyi could only give up when he saw this, and he said to Fengzhou, "Then you rest first. I'll come over later." As he spoke, he followed the beautiful woman to the room next door. "Sir, you'll stay here tonight. You're..." Duanyi's eyes looked at Duanyi's eyes was, "Madam," Duanyi said, then turned and left. After the woman left, Duanyi looked around the room and knocked on the door of Fengzhou's room. "Come in." Fengzhou was sitting in front of the dressing table, combing his hair. Seeing Duanyi enter, he put down the comb and turned to look at him, asking with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Chapter 22:16. Hearing this, Fengzhou's lips curled into a smile. "Of course it's the beauties. Do you even need to ask? Look at the three of them, they each have their own beauty. There's one who's delicate and charming, one who's coquettish, one who's cold and elegant. Also, that madam has a voluptuous figure and an outstanding face. She has a different kind of charm, but why do I feel like they're missing a pure and innocent one? Say, don't tell me there's another one." Hearing this, Duanyi's face darkened, and he said in annoyance, "Can you be more serious? I'm talking about serious matters with you. This woman, why is she so unreliable? Can't she see that I'm worried?" I'm very serious. She chuckled. Aren't we already here, and nothing has happened, so what are you so nervous about? Besides, they're all women. Even if they're at a disadvantage, it's the women who are at a disadvantage. What are you worried about? But. He opened his mouth, and finally, like a deflated balloon, he said, forget it, I don't care anymore. The two of them sat in the room for a while and chatted until the sky darkened, and a woman's voice came from outside the room. The two of you, my mother invites the two of you to the front courtyard for a meal. The person who called them was the delicate and pretty woman. In the room, Fengjiu heard this and couldn't help but smile. He stood up and said to Duanyi, let's go. With a beauty by your side, what else do you have to be dissatisfied with? With that, he smiled and walked out. The two of you, please follow me. The woman's pretty face turned slightly, and she lowered her eyes with a smile. She held a lamp in her hand, and turned around to lead the way. The sky was dark, and the moon had not yet risen. There were no lights on the small path in the courtyard, so the lamp in the woman's hand became a guiding light. Fengjiu and Duanyi followed behind her at a moderate pace, and came to the front courtyard. They saw a large table in the front courtyard, and on the table were more than 10 exquisite dishes and 2 jugs of fine wine. 3 beautiful women were busy there, and some were setting up wine cups, and some were preparing bowls and chopsticks. Seeing the additional person, a pure and innocent woman in a white dress, Fengjiu couldn't help but smile, and glanced at Duanyi beside him. That glance seemed to say, see. Am I right? There really is a pure and innocent woman. The two of you are here. Please take a seat. The madam walked out from the back and gestured for the two to take a seat. Fengjiu and Duanyi walked forward and said to the madam with a smile, sorry to disturb you. I didn't expect that the host would entertain us so warmly. It's fate that we met. Quick, sit down. After she sat down, she gestured for the other two to sit down as well. Then, she smiled and said, let me introduce you two. These are my 4 daughters, Yu Jiao, Yu Rong, Yu Hua, and Yu Xiang. You two have already met the first 3, but this is the youngest. She patted the hand of the woman in white beside her and said with a smile. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, Madam is so lucky. These young ladies are all so beautiful that they are like fairies. Hearing this, the madam chuckled. At most, they can be considered passable. How can they compare to Miss Celestial Beauty? As she spoke, she looked at Fengjiu and asked, I still don't know how to address Miss Fengjiu. She said with a smile, and didn't hide her name. She looked at Duanyi and said, this is Duanyi, my friend. The two women looked at each other and nudged her gently. Miss Feng. Miss Feng. Seeing that there was no response, he smiled. I thought she would be difficult to deal with. But it turns out she's only like this. The delicate woman said with a smile. The woman in white next to her said, no matter how high a cultivator's cultivation is, they would be drunk to the point of unconsciousness after drinking the immortal intoxication, not to mention she drank so much. All right, she can't run away anyway. Let's go over there and take a look. The delicate woman said and pulled the woman in white outside. Chapter 22:18. His entire body was boiling hot, as if his blood was boiling. However, he could not muster any strength in his body. He had drunk a lot of wine and was a little drunk, but at this moment, his consciousness was gradually waking up because of his burning body. He squinted his eyes and tried to open them. In his hazy state, he saw 2 women working together to lift him up and put him on a stone bed. His burning body touched the cold stone surface, and it was very comfortable. However, in the next moment, his 4 limbs were tied up, and he was lying on the bed with his arms and legs spread out, unable to move. He was shocked and opened his mouth. What are you doing?" He was about to shout, but when his voice came out, it was clear that he was powerless. On the other side, Fengzhou, who was sleeping, opened her eyes after the 2 women left. She turned around and jumped up, walking out. After leaving her room, when she passed by another room in the courtyard, her eyes moved slightly, and she looked at the locked door. She walked forward softly, took out something and fiddled with the lock. Not long after, the lock opened with a click. She gently pushed the door open and walked in, then gently closed the door. When she walked in, she smelled a faint smell of wine and medicinal herbs. She was slightly surprised. Could it be that medicinal wine was hidden here? With a flip of her hand, she took out a luminous pearl and shone it in front of her. When she looked, she felt a wave of nausea surge out from her stomach, and she almost vomited. There were many transparent wine jars that were used to soak medicinal wine. The wine in the jars was good, but there were also some internal organs of beasts soaking in the wine. At first glance, it was really disgusting. She glanced around and saw that one of the jars was filled with the eyeballs of beasts. Some of them were intestines, while others were claws and tendons. When she saw the latter part, her heart skipped a beat. The ones at the latter part were actually human. Her expression changed slightly. She put away the luminous pearl and quickly turned to leave, heading to the courtyard next door. When she entered the courtyard, she heard the voices of the madam and her so-called daughters talking. "Be careful later. He is a cultivator of the fairy realm. His inner core is good stuff. Master, the medicinal wine is ready. We can start at any time. Master, what should we do with the woman in red? She's still sleeping over there." Another person asked. "That woman's appearance is so outstanding. Naturally, she should be taken good care of. When I'm done here, I'll use the soul assimilation technique on her to make her forget the past. In the future, she'll be your sister." Hearing the laughter inside, Fengzhou's heart was filled with anger. She stepped forward and kicked the door open. With a loud bang, the door shattered. "Who is it?" The people in the room were shocked and shouted. When they turned around, they couldn't help but be startled. They were all astonished. "It's you. Wasn't she unconscious after drinking the drunken immortal? Why was he here?" When the beautiful woman saw that the person who came was Fengzhou, her beautiful eyes flashed, and she looked at her with some surprise. "You're not drunk?" There was actually someone who drank the immortal drunken wine and didn't get drunk. She couldn't help but size up the beautiful woman in red again. Seeing the cold glint in her eyes, her entire body filled with biting cold killing intent, and her profound aura surging, she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "You're a mystic." Chapter 22:19. Fengzhou's clear and cold gaze swept past her before landing on Duan Ye's body, which was tied up on the stone bed in the room. When she saw that he was completely unharmed, she finally relaxed. "I can't be bothered to deal with beasts, but I can't stand to watch as you lay your hands on humans. Especially since you've dared to lay your hands on my people." As she spoke, she pulled out a dagger and twirled it around in her hand. The dagger's gleaming sharpness was particularly horrifying in the night. Just as their gazes fell upon the dagger in her hand, they saw a flash of red robes before their eyes. The woman's body flashed forward and the gleaming dagger stabbed towards the beautiful woman in front of her. Interesting. The beautiful woman flashed a demonic smile. When she saw Fengzhou's dagger coming towards her, she immediately stepped forward and raised her long sword to meet the attack. Clang! The dagger and sword clashed against each other, producing a clanging sound. The auras from both of their bodies surged outwards and the powerful air currents caused the atmosphere to become oppressive. The women's powers were not very high. Under the pressure from both of their auras, their faces turned pale and cold sweat broke out from their bodies. When Duan Yi, who was lying on the stone bed, saw Fengzhou's arrival, he heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed completely. It was a good thing that he had thought that she had fallen for the trick. Now, it seems that he was the only one who had fallen for the trick. However, with her around, he should be fine. However, why does my body feel as if it's on fire? It doesn't feel like I've been drugged with an aphrodisiac. Instead, it feels like there's a fire burning in my blood, causing my inner core to heat up as well. Inner core. That's right. These people had wanted to dig out my inner core. They had even said that they had prepared some strong wine and were waiting for my inner core to be soaked in. What are they trying to do? What's the point of digging out my inner core? While he was deep in thought, Fengzhou's dagger flew towards the beautiful woman with a sharp blade aura. The beautiful woman suddenly dodged to the side and dodged the fatal dagger which was flying towards her heart. However, just as she was about to turn around, a pair of hands had silently grabbed her throat. Don't move. Fengzhou stood behind the beautiful woman, one hand twisting her hand behind her back, the other hand grabbing her throat and lifting her chin slightly, making her stand on her tiptoes. I don't know how to show mercy to women. It wouldn't be good if I didn't control my strength well enough to break your neck. His gentle voice was cold, and the chilling killing intent in his words caused the beautiful woman's body to stiffen. At this moment, her beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. It was as if she couldn't believe that she, a spiritual cultivator at the fairy realm, would actually lose to a Xian cultivator. Furthermore, it was at the hands of a girl of such a young age. Master! Master! When the four women saw this scene, they cried out in alarm. However, when they saw their master being captured, they did not dare to step forward. Some of them had already quietly moved away and were about to escape. However, at this moment, Fengzhou waved his hand and 3 silver needles shot out. Swish! Swish! Ah! The cold and elegant woman was hit by the silver needles and fell from the sky, crying out in pain. When she saw her master's cold gaze, she couldn't help but shrink back and lower her head with a pale face. Chapter 22:20. She didn't feel that she had done anything wrong, but she didn't dare to meet her master's icy cold gaze. She had seen her vicious and inhumane methods, and rather than saying that she respected her, it would be more accurate to say that she feared her even more. Fengzhou glanced at them and said, I didn't ask you to leave, so none of you can leave. Saying that, she used her profound energy to lock that beautiful woman's shoulder blade, causing her to fall onto the ground without any strength in her body before she walked forward. When those few women saw her walking forward, their hearts trembled and they couldn't help but retreat backwards. One of them suddenly thought of something and quickly walked over to Duanye's side, picked up a small knife by the side and pressed it against Duanye's throat as she shouted sternly at Fengzhou, Stop right there. You're not allowed to come over. Fengzhou's brows rose as a devilish smile hung on his lips as he stared at her. His gaze swept past her fearless face and landed on the hand which was holding onto the small knife. She saw that the small knife which was pressed against Duanye's throat was lowered slightly as it cut his skin, causing a trace of blood to seep out. That bright red blood was extremely glaring to her eyes. Be careful, don't hurt my men. She spoke in a neither hurried nor slow manner as her gaze stared at the small knife in her hand and a cold glint flashed past the depths of her eyes. Not knowing if it was because she was frightened by Fengzhou's gaze or what, that woman's hand which was holding onto the small knife against Duan Ye's throat couldn't help but move away a little as she shouted at Fengjiu at the same time, "Let go of my master. Otherwise, I'll kill him." Fengjiu's lips curled into a smile, "All right." She responded, and just as she turned around, her clear eyes swept towards her and saw that she heaved a sigh of relief. Her footsteps shifted slightly and the hand which was pressed against Duan Ye's throat also moved away a little. Just at this moment, she turned around and the 3 silver needles in her hand shot out with a whoosh. Amen. With a muffled groan, the woman's eyes widened in shock. 2 silver needles had pierced between her eyebrows, while the last one had pierced her throat. 3 needles had been fired at the same time, killing her in one blow. "I hate being threatened the most. Since you dare to threaten me, you should be prepared to die." She strode forward step by step, her red dress fluttering with her every step. The other 2 people retreated in horror, not daring to approach her. Bang! The woman fell straight to the ground. Even when she died, she did not manage to catch her breath, nor did she manage to close her eyes. Fengjiu only glanced indifferently at the 2 women who had retreated, then walked forward to untie the rope that bound Duan Yi. He stretched out his hand and saw that Duan Ye's body was heating up, and the blood in his body was boiling as if his blood vessels were about to explode. Thus, he took out a pill and fed it to Duan Yi. "Circulate your qi and walk around your body. You should be fine after sweating it out," she said to Duan Yi. Then, she said to the 2 women at the side, "Bring a chair over." As she spoke, she walked out of the courtyard. The 2 women trembled and looked at each other. The woman in white then brought a chair over and placed it in the courtyard. She did not dare to run away and retreated to the side. "Speak. How long have you been doing this for? What are you planning to do with those things?" She sat lazily on the chair and stared at the beautiful woman whose shoulder blades had been locked by her. She then looked at the 2 people who were curled up in a corner and the man who was sprawled on the ground. Those 3 people were already dead. Seeing this, Fengjiu was slightly surprised. "You killed them all." This brat was too impatient. He didn't even say a word before he killed them all. Of the his. Duan Yi looked at her. "What? This person can't be killed like this. I still have a use for him," Fengjiu said with a smile. He walked forward and looked at the beautiful woman. "You know the soul-absorbing technique?" Chapter 22. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled indifferently. "It's all right, I didn't want you to tell me anyway." As soon as her voice fell, she revealed a strange smile, "Because, I have plenty of ways to find out." As she spoke, she raised her hand and reached towards the woman's head. Seeing this, the beautiful woman's pupils shrank and she wanted to retreat in shock. You want to soul search." Soul searching was a method to find out everything about the other party. However, the person who was soul searched would suffer from dementia in the lightest case and death in the worst case. It could be said that after soul searching, the person would be crippled. Fengjiu curled her lips into a smile and ignored her struggle and fear. She reached out her hand and pressed it. At the same time, as she adjusted her profound energy aura, a trace of divine sense also entered her mind. Duan Yi stood at the side and watched. He watched as she stood there quietly with her eyes closed. He watched as the beautiful woman stood there in a daze and did not move at all. After a long time, he saw Fengjiu retract her hand. At this time, the beautiful woman was already lying on the ground. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, she also stopped breathing. Fengjiu closed her eyes and digested everything in her mind. After a long time, she opened her eyes and said, I saw the one-eyed devil cultivator who dealt with them in her memories. That was one of the 10 devils, the one-eyed mad demon. She looked at him and said, the 10 great devil cultivators under the demon sovereign are not easy to deal with. Now that my spiritual energy is sealed and there's no way to know the time in this woman's mind, these few days will be the time we agreed to meet with the one-eyed mad demon. Let's deal with this place and leave as soon as possible. All right. Duan nodded and looked around. It's most convenient to burn this place down. Thus, the two of them used strong wine to light the fire and set the place on fire. The fire burned along with the strong wine, and the medicinal wine in the medicine bottles also exploded along with the heat of the fire. With a rumble, the fire rushed into the sky and almost lit up half of the sky. They watched from afar. The place happened to be at the bottom of the hill, so the fire did not spread. It was only when the courtyard was burned down and the fire gradually died down that they left on the flying vehicle. The sun in the sky quietly rose and the first rays of sunlight scattered on the ground. Dawn had arrived quietly. Duan sat on the flying vehicle and looked at Fingzhou, who was lying next to him sleeping with her eyes closed. He frowned and asked, Immortal drunken immortal wine, why aren't you drunk? Fengzhou, who was resting with her eyes closed, smiled when she heard this. She didn't even open her eyes and said leisurely, how can that be the same? Don't know who I am. Hearing this, the corner of Duan's mouth twitched. You're Fengzhou, you're amazing. He was puzzled. Since that wine was indeed drunken immortal, why wasn't she drunk? So you to be more careful next time, you may not be able to eat the things that I can eat. As she spoke, she opened her eyes and sat up. She smiled and said, tell me, what did you learn in that sect? Why don't I have to learn to improve you to me? Duan, Fengzhou of, Fengyi, of T, Fa of course. Frowning, Fa's well, he, to her, to him to the end, he, to, of course, he, to, of to, and was, to him, the. Chapter 22-23. The two of them sat on the flying device until they reached a town. Then, they disembarked and walked towards the city gate. Seeing many people lined up in front of them, Duan looked at Fengzhou. We didn't have a good rest last night. Let's rest here for the night. They'll take care of the Heavenly Pill building, so you don't have to worry too much. Fengzhou smiled. That's good too. Anyway, there's nothing much to do now. I'm just afraid that my brother and Imo-chin will be worried about me. As she spoke, she looked towards the city and said, later, let's enter the city and see if there's a branch of the Tianyuan Palace. If there is, let them send a message back so that they won't be worried at home. Then let's also send a message to Song Ming and the others. Tell them that I've left the sect to follow you. He looked at her and said. That's fine too. She nodded. The two of them walked forward together and followed the people lining up to the city gate. Looking at the city gate guards who seemed to be searching for something, her eyes moved slightly. She said, those people seem to be looking for something. It was normal for there to be guards at the city gate. However, searching people's bodies like this was a little too much, especially when there were some women among them. It was really outrageous to let 1 or 2 male guards search their bodies. Duan looked to the front and saw that some of the women from ordinary families had heard that they would be searched after entering the city gate, so they all retreated back. Some of the female cultivators walked forward, but the guards did not dare to be too presumptuous, and only roughly sized them up before letting them go. I'm really not hiding anything on me. I'm just carrying my sister. We're entering the city to find a doctor. My family lives in a small mountain village not far from the city. Really, I'm just an ordinary woman. A plainly dressed woman was carrying a 7 or 8-year-old girl wrapped in a sheet. When she saw the guard's outstretched hand, she could not help but retreat as she explained. What kind of woman would be willing to be searched by a man like this? Even if she was not a cultivator and was just an ordinary person, she would not be willing to be taken advantage of like this. Who knows if you're telling the truth? It's not peaceful in the city these days. Everyone has to be checked carefully. It's the same for men and women. A city guard said and pushed the woman arrogantly. It's fine if you don't want to be checked. Hurry up and move aside. Don't block the path of the people behind you. There were almost no young women in the queue. However, when some of the older women came forward, those people simply looked at them and waved their hands to let them pass. Obviously, they had no interest in the older women. I hear that a good number of people have died in the city recently. That is why the city is under martial law. Everyone who goes in and out is checked. However, the actions of these people are too obvious. They dare not offend the female cultivators and have no interest in touching the older women. That's right. There was a teenage girl from our village who wanted to enter the city to buy medicine for her father. She was stopped by these people and taken advantage of quite a bit. When she went back, her eyes were swollen from crying. These days, some young girls won't enter the city for no reason. Even if they have something to do, they will ask others to do it for them. Cultivators don't dare to provoke them, so they can only let us ordinary people suffer. The two old men and the man standing in front of Fingzhou and Duanyi whispered. Their gazes swept past the crowd in front of them and landed on the woman carrying the girl on her back. They then glanced at the city guards. Fengzhou stopped, glanced at the woman, and said to the city guard captain, "This woman is carrying a child and has been here for a long time. She's just an ordinary person, why don't you let her in?" "Yes, yes. Since Fairy has spoken, this lowly one does not dare to disobey." The city guard captain hurriedly responded and said to the woman beside him, "Quickly go in." Seeing this, the woman with the child on her back gratefully said to Fengzhou, "Thank you, Fairy." "Thank you, Fairy." Then she quickly carried her sister into the city. When she saw the woman enter the city, Fengzhou glanced at the captain of the city guards and said, "It's the first time I've seen such city guards. Could it be that your city governor allowed you to seize the opportunity to take advantage of the city?" Hearing this, the city guard captain's face paled, and he cried out in his heart, "Oh no." Chapter 22-25. Fairy, Fairy, please calm down. Actually, we're just doing this for the safety of the city. The city guard captain quickly said, "Fairy, there's something you don't know. These days, people have been killed in the city, and it's not just one or two. That's why we've increased our vigilance and investigation. If there's anything we can't do, we'll definitely change." Fengzhou was too lazy to talk to them. He only said, "It's best if you remember what you said. Watch your subordinates. If this kind of thing happens again, don't blame me for going to your city lord." "Yes, yes, yes. We won't dare, we won't dare." The city guard captain replied while wiping his sweat. He bowed and smiled as he sent them into the city. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. "Captain, she's just a young lady. Why are you afraid of her?" a city guard asked in a small voice. He didn't understand. That woman's temperament was a bit more outstanding. Her appearance was more beautiful than the other beauties. She was such a delicate beauty, but she didn't have any spiritual energy. He really didn't know why the captain was so scared. Hearing this, the city guard captain fiercely kicked the city guard. What do you know? He glared at the city guard and scolded, hurry up and watch over the people entering the city. Don't take advantage of other people's women. Otherwise, I'll skin you alive. Hearing this, the city guards' faces paled. They quickly replied, yes, yes. Only then did they return to their posts. However, this time, they were a lot more obedient and didn't dare to act recklessly. When the cultivators in the line saw this, they couldn't help but look at the red figure in the distance. They were a bit surprised. Generally speaking, cultivators couldn't be bothered with other people's business. They didn't expect the woman in red to stand up and give them a warning. However, just as the city guard had said, the red-clothed lady did not have the slightest bit of spiritual energy aura on her body. She did not look like a cultivator at all. Even so, from their point of view, they felt that the lady's immortal chi was definitely not ordinary. There was also the man beside her. He didn't look very old, but his aura was very intimidating. They reckoned that the two of them might have come from some large sect. Duan Yi, who was walking in the city, saw Fengjiu leisurely walking in front of him. He couldn't help but quicken his steps. He arrived beside her and asked, "Did you find the place you were talking about? There's none on this street. Let's walk a bit further." As she spoke, she turned a corner and came to a small stall that sold pastry at the corner of the street. She bought 10 of them. It smells really good. She took a deep breath and smelled the fragrance of the pastry, revealing a happy smile. Duan Ye's Sake's TT want to find a place. Let you have something to eat. As he spoke, he glanced around and saw that there were many shops and stalls in this area. Thus, he went to the stall selling pastries and asked, "Old man, which restaurant is the most famous in this city?" Chapter 22-26. We still have the money for food. Elder, tell me, where should we go to the 100 Fragrances house? Duan Yi asked with a smile. He knew that Fengjiu was picky when it came to food, especially when it came to delicious food. Since they wanted to sit down and rest here, they naturally had to go to a better place. It's not far. Just go straight ahead and turn left for a while. The elder pointed and told them. Thank you. Duan Yi thanked him and then said to Fengjiu, "Let's go to the 100 Fragrances house." Okay. Fengjiu said and walked forward with him. When they turned a corner and walked for a while, she caught a glimpse of a sign on a tea house from the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but smile. "Go to the 100 Fragrances house and wait for me. I'll be there in a while." Fengjiu motioned for him to go first. Duan Yi turned back and followed her gaze to a tea house. Seeing the smile on her face, he nodded and said, "Okay, then I'll order a table of dishes and wait for you. When you're done, come over." Okay. Fengjiu smiled and then walked toward the tea house. Nowadays, the people who were in charge of the forces outside the Tianyuan Palace were all carefully selected. Their main purpose was to gather information and secretly expand their forces. However, there were many people she hadn't seen before. Only Lang Hua and the others had contact with the 8 Great Phoenix Guards. When they arrived at the tea house across the street, they saw that the first floor was full of people drinking tea and chatting. As soon as they entered the tea house, they heard lively chatter and laughter. Faintly, they could hear some voices on the second floor. "How is it? I told you this place is good, right? Look, we can see the guests of the 100 Fragrances house sitting across from here. Look, the 2 women sitting at the table by the window on the second floor are beautiful, right? One of them is the city lord's daughter. She often comes to the 100 Fragrances house to drink tea and eat snacks. The one opposite is also very beautiful. She's wearing a blue dress. Her appearance makes people unable to take their eyes off her. There's another table. Look, do you see the guests sitting at that table? Look at their appearances. Regardless of whether they are men or women, they are all outstanding and handsome. One look and you can tell that they are not ordinary people. That's right. How can the people who can enter the 100 Fragrances house be ordinary? Those who can eat and sit there are all people of high status. Fengjiu slowly walked inside. Listening to the chaotic sounds in the tea house, she came to the counter. Shopkeeper. She looked at the middle-aged man and asked. The shopkeeper was tidying up his things. When he heard the voice, he looked up and was slightly startled. That's right. What can I do for you? Fengjiu nodded and said, It's a little noisy here. Is there a quiet place? Because of her stunning appearance and dazzling red dress, almost all the people on the first floor looked at her as soon as she entered the tea house. Yes, this way please. The shopkeeper didn't know what she wanted to do, but there was still a quiet place. Thus, he called for the waiter to take his place while he led Fengjiu to the back. It was a backyard behind the first floor. It was very quiet and there was no one else. Of course, there were two auras in the dark. When the two people who were hiding in the dark saw the person who had arrived, they looked around. When they saw the face of the woman in red, they could not help but be shocked. They quickly came out from the dark and bowed respectfully and excitedly. Chapter 22-27. Seeing the two people come out from the shadows and hearing their words, the shopkeeper was stunned. He looked at Fengjiu in astonishment. Moss, master. Their master could only be the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. In other words, this stunning red-clothed woman in front of him was his master, the ghost doctor. Get up. Fengjiu sat down at the table in the courtyard and motioned for the two kneeling people to get up. Moss, master. The shopkeeper hurriedly knelt down and said in fear, I didn't know it was master who came. Please forgive me for my rudeness. It's fine. She waved her hand and said, I just happened to pass by here and was about to rest here for a day. I also want you to send a message back to the Heavenly Pill House in 100 River City. The three people looked at each other and one of the Phoenix guards said, Please give us your orders, master. The shopkeeper hurriedly turned and went to a room in the courtyard. He took out a brush, ink, and paper and placed it on the table. Please use it, master. Fengjiu saw this and glanced at the shopkeeper. He then wrote a few words on the paper and sealed it with a watermark. He handed it to one of the Phoenix guards. Just send this out. Yes. The Phoenix guard responded. He took the things and left after bowing. At this time, the shopkeeper served them tea and then stood quietly to the side. This tea house is opposite the 100 Fragrances Inn. It seems that business is good. Fengjiu took a sip of tea and asked slowly. Master, business is good. There are many people drinking tea and there are many things to talk about. The shopkeeper said. Fengjiu held the lid of the teacup and gently scraped the tea. He asked, Is there any news about the Temple of Darkness recently? I only heard that the Temple of Darkness has been reorganizing and rarely comes out. I also heard that the Temple Master of the Temple of Darkness has been cultivating in seclusion. It seems that he hasn't recovered from the injuries he suffered some time ago. Hearing this, Fengjiu's hand paused. He hasn't recovered from the injuries. Although she didn't hold back, with the strength of the Temple Master of the Temple of Darkness, he shouldn't have not recovered yet, right? Could it be that he deliberately spread the news? I heard that many people have died in this city in the past few days. Do you know who did it? She asked again. Master, this seems to be the work of a demonic cultivator. I've seen those who were killed. They all had one thing in common. The deceased were all female cultivators, and the way they died was that they had been sucked dry of their blood essence. Their corpses. The Phoenix guard beside him said respectfully. Another demonic cultivator. She frowned as she recalled the incident with the one-eyed mad demon. Yes, but this demonic cultivator's cultivation level should be very high. The city lord sent many cultivators to ambush him. Although they encountered him once, they were unable to capture him. Instead, several cultivators were killed. This matter is very troublesome in the city, and almost no one dares to interfere. The demonic cultivator of the Temple of Darkness was too powerful. The city lord of the city and the people of the various clans were guarding their own homes and didn't care much about the matters outside. Moreover, most of the people who died were female cultivators or itinerant cultivators. Therefore, under the situation where they couldn't catch the demonic cultivator, they were more worried about their own family than about the people outside. Is it happening every night? She raised her eyebrows and asked. It has already happened 5 nights in a row. Every night, 2 to 3 female cultivators die. Chapter 22-28. Yes. The shopkeeper responded happily and sent her out. However, when he reached the first floor, he saw a few men blocking his master's way. He was so scared that his face turned pale. Oh, where did this little beauty come from? Shopkeeper, is she your relative? A few men blocked in front of Fingzhou and stared at the beautiful Fingzhou with lustful eyes. In their eyes, the beauty in red did not have the slightest bit of spiritual power. She was obviously not a cultivator. She should be a rich girl. They were all cultivators, so they naturally wouldn't put a rich girl in their eyes. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to block her path. The shopkeeper carefully glanced at Fengzhou. Seeing that her expression was normal, he said, "If you want to drink tea, please go upstairs. We don't allow trouble here." These people really didn't know what was good for them. They even dared to block his master's way. They must be tired of living. What tea? Go away. One of the men pushed the shopkeeper, but he saw that the shopkeeper's footsteps were steady, and he didn't even sway a bit. "Since you don't want to drink tea, please leave," the shopkeeper said calmly. For a moment, the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator filled the air. He opened a tea house here. Don't treat him as an ordinary shopkeeper. If he could become a member of the Tianyuan Palace and become a Phoenix Guard recognized by his master, how could he be qualified to be a shopkeeper without strength? In the past, when no one caused trouble, he naturally restrained his strength and acted as an inconspicuous shopkeeper. However, these people really did not know what was good for them. They dared to have ideas about his master. How annoying! When the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator came out, the men's faces turned pale. They were only in the Golden Core realm. How could they withstand the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator? Immediately, sweat appeared on their foreheads. Their faces were pale and they looked at the shopkeeper with horror in their eyes. Their legs trembled. We have eyes but did not recognize Mount Tai. We have offended you. We will leave immediately." They panicked and turned to leave. However, just as they turned around, they heard the voice of the woman in red. "You want to leave just like that?" Fengzhou raised his eyebrows and glanced at them. She walked forward step by step and stopped in front of the few people who had stopped in their tracks. "Settle the bill." Upon hearing this, the men were startled. We've already paid the bill upstairs. I'm talking about the accounts of everyone upstairs and downstairs. The corners of her lips curled up as she stared at them coldly. Do you think you can leave after offending me? Go, calculate the accounts of the people upstairs and downstairs. Put it all on these people. As soon as she finished speaking, she glanced at the shopkeeper. Double it. Chapter 22-29. Just as they were about to run out, Fingzhou's palm moved and a few silver needles shot out. Ah! A few cries of pain rang out at the same time. They only felt their legs go numb and their bodies involuntarily fell forward. Just as they were shocked, they reached out to touch their legs and touched the exposed silver needle. Seeing this, their hearts couldn't help but tremble. Their faces paled as they turned around to look. They saw that the woman in red moved a chair to the side and sat down. She held her chin with one hand and looked at them with a leisurely expression. Run. Didn't you want to run? She played with a silver needle between her fingers. The cold light of the silver needle made the hearts of the men tremble. At this time, how could they dare to think of running away? No, we won't run, we won't run. We'll pay, they hurriedly said. Compared to money, their lives were naturally more important. This woman in red could make them unable to run once she made a move. Who knew if she would give them a fatal blow if they ran and angered her? Master, the bill has been settled. The shopkeeper walked over and stood respectfully beside Fingzhou. When the men outside heard the shopkeeper call the woman in red master, their faces turned pale. How could a nascent soul cultivator call her master be an ordinary person? They must be tired of living to provoke her. Hearing this, Fingzhou stood up and walked out, saying, then settle the bill with them. Tell the guests upstairs and downstairs that today's expenses were paid by these people. Let them eat and drink to their heart's content. Yes. The shopkeeper responded. Seeing that his master had walked out and was walking towards the 100 Fragrances house, he then went forward to settle the bill with those people. On the second floor of the 100 Fragrances house, Duan Yi was sitting by the window drinking tea. At this time, he felt a few gazes secretly sizing him up. He couldn't help but frown and look towards the gazes. Seeing that it was two women, the two of them hurriedly lowered their heads when they saw him looking at them. Thus, he withdrew his gaze and ignored the two of them. Don't you think he looks like Martial Uncle Duan? Not far away, a woman lowered her voice and asked the woman at the same table. It looks like it. However, Junior Master Duan should be in the sect. Why is he here? Could it be that we've made a mistake? The woman in the sky blue dress said softly. I don't recognize it either. I only saw it once from afar. She thought for a moment and said, why don't we go over and ask? Ask? This isn't a good idea, right? The woman in the sky blue dress was a little hesitant. There's no harm in asking. The woman stood up and walked towards Duan Ye's table. She looked at the man who was sitting there and drinking tea. The closer she got, the more familiar that baby face was. Everyone in the sect knew that Martial Uncle Duan had a baby face, but they also knew that Martial Uncle Duan didn't like people talking about his baby face. The man in front of her had a baby face. Although his aura was cold, he really looked like her sect's Martial Uncle Duan. She took a deep breath and mustered her courage to ask, excuse me, are you Martial Uncle Duan? Chapter 22-30. He turned around and looked at the woman. His gaze swept past her before he glanced at the woman in blue who followed behind her. He frowned but did not answer. Seeing this, the woman asked again, may I ask if you're Duan Yi from the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect, Uncle Master Duan? The woman was afraid that he would not answer, so she quickly said, both of us are disciples of the Cloud Jade Immortal sect. I'm Lu Xian, and she's Ruan Ru. What's the matter? He frowned and asked with a cold expression. Hearing this, Lu Xian was delighted. Did he admit it? Was he really Uncle Master Duan? When she thought of this, an excited smile appeared on her face. Uncle Master Duan, it's really you. I came home some time ago. I've seen you once in the sect from afar, but I'm not sure. That's why I came forward to ask. Then, without waiting for Duan Yi to speak, she said, Uncle Master Duan, my father is the city governor here. Since Uncle Master Duan has come to Lu He City, why don't you stay at my house for a few days? Let me be the host and entertain Uncle Master Duan. There's no need. Duan Yi said and did not look at them anymore. Oh. I've only left for a while. Why are two little beauties here? A teasing voice sounded. When Duan Yi heard this voice, he turned around and a hint of warmth flashed in his eyes. You're back. The two women heard the voice and turned around. When they saw a beautiful woman in red walking over, they could not help but be stunned. What a beautiful woman. Even as women, they could not help but be stunned when they saw her. Fengjiu walked forward and passed by the two women. He sat down in front of Duan Yi and leaned against the windowsill as if he had no bones. He looked at the two women with a faint smile on his face. Where did these two little beauties come from? When Lu Xian and Ruan Ru saw that Uncle Master Duan knew the woman in red, they did not dare to be rude. They immediately bent their knees and bowed. Greetings, sister. I'm Lu Xian, an inner sect disciple of the Cloud Jade Immortal sect. I'm Ruan Ru, also an inner sect disciple of the Cloud Jade Immortal sect, the woman in blue said and bowed to Fengjiu. Oh. The Cloud Jade Immortal sect. Doesn't that mean he's from the same sect as you? Fengjiu propped up his chin with one hand and smiled as he looked at Duan Yi. Duan Yi saw her teasing expression and his face couldn't help but darken. I don't know them. When the two women heard this, they couldn't help but be startled. They wanted to say something, but they found that they couldn't say anything. That's right, he didn't know them. He was a person that they respected as martial uncle, so how could he possibly recognize inner court disciples like them? Even they had seen him once from afar. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been unable to determine whether the person before them was martial uncle Duan. Hearing this, Fengjiu glanced at him and said coldly, the young lady already said that she's from your sect, and you still don't recognize her. Even if we don't know each other, we're still from the same sect. Sister, martial uncle Duan really doesn't know us. We've only seen martial uncle Duan once from afar. As Lu Xian spoke, she looked at Fengjiu and said, actually, it's like this. I just happened to meet martial uncle Duan, and my father is the city lord of Lu He City, so I wanted to invite martial uncle Duan to stay at my house for a few days so that we can play host to him. Chapter 22:31. I'm not going. Duan Yi said, pouring tea and drinking it, not looking at her. Seeing this, Fengjiu narrowed her eyes with a smile, looked at Lu Xian, and asked, Miss Lu, if he doesn't go, I'll go. Will you invite him? Lu Xian was startled. She glanced at Duan Yi, then looked at Fengjiu, and quickly said, of course, if elder sister can come, I will definitely entertain you with great hospitality. Ruan Ru, who was next to them, listened for a long time and did not come back to her senses. She carefully glanced at the black-faced martial uncle Duan, and then looked at the smiling beautiful woman in red. She secretly guessed what the relationship between this woman in red and martial uncle Duan was. Why did she feel so strange when the two of them got along? Didn't you say you would only stay for one night? How many days do you plan to stay here? Aren't you in a hurry to go back? Duan Yi asked angrily, feeling that Fengzhou just liked to disagree with him. Hey, I'm not in a hurry. Didn't I ask someone to send a message back to report that I'm safe? There's nothing urgent to deal with when I go back. Since Miss Liu has invited me, I can't refuse, right? She said with a smile, completely unaware that she was the one who asked to stay in someone else's house for a while. It's fine if you don't want to go. I just asked the shopkeeper of the tea house across the street to make 2 rooms available. If you don't want to go, you can stay in the courtyard of the tea house. By the way, tell him that I'm going to stay in the city lord's house. She said with a smile. Seeing that the 2 of them were still standing, she motioned, don't just stand there. Sit. The 2 of them instinctively glanced at Duan Yi. Seeing his dark face, they didn't know whether they should sit properly or not. What are you looking at me for? She asked you to sit, so sit. Duan Yi said angrily. When the 2 of them heard this, they were overjoyed and smiled. Yes, thank you, Martial Uncle Duan. Thank you, elder sister. Pfft. Fengzhou couldn't help laughing when she heard the 2 of them address her. She chuckled and looked at the 2 of them playfully, saying, You call Duan Yi Martial Uncle, but call me elder sister. Isn't this nonsense? The 2 of them were startled. They couldn't help but look at each other. Then how should we address each other? The 2 of them were also stunned. This red-clothed woman looked to be only 1 or 2 years older than them. If they didn't call her elder sister, then what should they call her? Duan Yi glanced at Fengzhou and lowered his eyes without saying anything. In terms of seniority, she was his mentor, so her status was higher than his. However, from the 2 people from his sect, they called him Martial Uncle and her elder sister. Based on this, wouldn't Fengzhou be his junior? You can call her the Ghost Doctor. Duan Yi said, glancing at Lu Shi and Yan Yan. Ghost Doctor. The 2 of them were stunned for a moment. Why was it the Ghost Doctor? Why was such a beautiful woman called the Ghost Doctor? Although he was puzzled, he didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately bent his knees and bowed, Ghost Doctor. Fengzhou's brows raised as he glanced at Duan Yi, and then he said to the 2 of them, Sit. Don't just stand there. Yes. The 2 of them sat down at this time. What surprised Fengzhou was that the city lord's daughter, Lu Shiyan, didn't have the style of an unruly and arrogant young lady. Instead, she was much more pleasing to the eye. He originally planned to stay at the tea house for a night, but since he met the city lord's daughter, he had to stay at the city lord's mansion. Have you ordered? Why haven't you served yet? Fengzhou looked at Duan Yi and asked. Chapter 2232. Okay. The waiter responded, hurriedly went to the kitchen to see if the dishes were ready, and brought them all up. 8 signature dishes were served, and 2 pots of sake were also served. Fengzhou was about to pour the wine when he saw Lu Shiyan take the wine pot. I'll pour it. As she spoke, she poured the wine for them. Thank you for your trouble. Fengzhou said with a smile. She picked up the wine cup and took a sip of the wine. The wine was mellow, and the aftertaste was endless. She narrowed her eyes and said with a smile, This wine is good wine. Hearing this, Lu Shiyan said, Ghost Doctor, you may not know this, but this wine is unique to the 100 Fragrances house, and it is also the most famous wine in Luha City. The price of such a pot of wine is 100 gold coins per pot, and the 100 Fragrances house is only limited to selling 100 pots a day. Oh. Interesting. She played with the wine cup in her hand, gently swirling the wine in the cup. The fragrance of the wine overflowed with her swirling. This wine was thick and rich, but it was not strong. The taste was unique, and it was really something that she had never tasted anywhere else. Drinking this wine, she thought that her grandfather was addicted to wine. Now that they had returned to the Fong family's ancestral home, it would not be easy to find good wine there. If there was such good wine, if she prepared some and brought it back for him in the future, he would definitely be happy. With a thought, she asked, "Who is the owner of this 100 Fragrances house?" "This, we don't know." The two shook their heads and said, "Do you want to buy wine?" Duanyi asked, seeing through her thoughts at once. He knew that she was addicted to wine. In the past, she would buy some good wine. Fengjiu looked at Duanyi and said with a smile, "Little Yi, you really know what I'm thinking." "I didn't even say it, but you know what I'm thinking. You don't have to go back to the sect in the future, just stay by my side." Hearing this, Duanyi snorted lightly and poured the wine to drink. When Lu Xian and Fengjiu saw this, they were stunned. Little Yi. Martial Uncle Duan was actually called Little Yi by the ghost doctor. What was the relationship between the two of them? For a moment, the two of them looked at them curiously. They said that they seemed to be close, but they didn't feel like it because there was no ambiguous atmosphere between the two of them. Instead, they felt that the two of them were like family, and this ghost doctor was the elder type. Look at the 3 words Little Yi, which normal person would be able to call her that? Especially since Master Duan was a strong fighter who had already reached the fairy realm, yet he had been called Xiaoye just like that. This gave them a fright. Perhaps no one in the sect knew that someone dared to call Martial Uncle Duan that way. Fengjiu and Duanyi were eating and drinking. Lu Xian and Wanru had eaten some before, but now they only tasted a little and didn't move their chopsticks much. When they were almost done eating, Duanyi beckoned the waiter over. "Sell me 2 jars of your sake." "Ah." The waiter was stunned for a moment, then he shook his head and said, "Young master, our wine is not for sale. You can only drink here." Hearing this, Duanyi frowned and said, "Who's the person in charge here? Help me call him out." When the waiter saw this, he quickly left. Not long after, he invited a middle-aged man over. The waiter said to them, "This is the manager of our 100 Fragrances house." As he spoke, he left. Chapter 2233. "Don't you sell the sake here?" Duanyi asked. The shopkeeper responded with a smile, "Yes, the wine in our restaurant can only be drunk here. It's not for sale." "What if you exchange it with something else?" Fengjiu asked, gently shaking the wine glass in her hand. The shopkeeper was slightly startled when he heard this. "This has never happened before." Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted. "Shopkeeper." The waiter ran over, pulled his sleeve, and whispered a few words in his ear. Hearing the waiter's words, the shopkeeper's heart moved slightly. He couldn't help but look at the beautiful woman in red, and said with a smile, "It turns out that you are an old friend of my master. My master ordered me to send 2 jars to you." He said to the waiter, "Go to the wine cellar and get 2 jars of wine." "Yes." The waiter responded and ran away quickly. Fengjiu raised her eyebrows when she heard this. "Old friend? Who is your master?" Why didn't she know when she knew such a person? Duanyi glanced at Fengjiu, thinking in her heart, needless to say, this person must be a man. Lu Xian and Wanru were slightly surprised in their hearts. They were both from this city, so they naturally knew the rule that the wine in the 100 Fragrances house was not for sale. Even if a person with a reputation in the city came, the wine would not be sold, let alone be given. It seemed that although they didn't know who this ghost doctor was, she really had some ability. Hearing Fengjiu's words, the shopkeeper was startled and said with a smile, how can you not know who my master is? With that, he paused and said, even if you really don't know, since my master said that you are an old friend, you must be someone who knows you. You can accept this wine. Fengjiu smiled and said, your master is here, right? Since she is an old friend, how can I not see her? Why don't you go and tell him that I want to meet his old friend? Hearing this, the shopkeeper smiled and said, all right, then please wait a moment, Mississippi. He bowed and left. In the attic on the top floor of the 100 Fragrances house, a masked man in a black robe was reclining on a soft couch. He was playing with a wine cup in his hand. He looked pensive. No one knew what he was thinking. If Fengjiu saw his current appearance, she would definitely recognize that he was none other than the temple master of the Temple of Darkness. Master, why did you give wine to the ghost doctor? She's clearly ruined so many of our plans. Since we know she's here, why don't we find an opportunity to make a move on her? An old man at the side asked with a frown, his eyes full of confusion. The palace master toyed with the wine cup in his hand and did not even lift his eyelids. Make a move on her? Heh, what's the point of that? Hearing this, the old man was slightly startled. What did he mean by that? Wasn't the ghost doctor their enemy? He really had never seen anyone give wine to an enemy. It was one thing to give a poisoned wine, but the other party was the ghost doctor. If it could be given out, it couldn't be poisoned. He really didn't know what his master was thinking. Although he felt that his master's way of doing things was a little strange, but he was still his master and it was not good for him to question too much. Thus, he stood quietly at the side and did not speak again. He secretly thought that perhaps his master had other plans. At this time, the shopkeeper's voice came from outside. Master, that lady in red wants to see you. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.